One of our editors, Shane Reed, who, fun fact, he was my editor on Taylor's music video that I directed. And I was obsessed with him. And I was like, this guy is amazing. And he never edited a movie before. He just finished Deadpool and Wolverine, and he came on and helped us with this one. And he has incredible taste in music. Yeah, and we share the same composer as well from Deadpool and Wolverine. So there's a lot of sharing happening this weekend.
Love this. You're dreaming, like you're building up your own dream team to just like work.
Hi, besties. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Well, if you blinked and you missed it, there was actually a moment in time where Blake Lively got in trouble with the judge, and it had to do with some privilege logs that she filed in court, and it was part of a motion to compel. And in it, the privilege log contained names and then phone numbers of people that didn't have a name attached, likely that whoever's log it was from, they didn't have the name stored as a contact. And Blake literally put that onto the docket, and then Blake filed it without redacting those phone numbers. Blake Lively, who has, for her part, demanded a protective order for personal identifying information, including email addresses, phone numbers, and addresses for herself and her own person, has consistently gone out of her way to not respect the privacy of others, including filing addresses of individuals and phone numbers and emails of the individuals that she is targeting in this lawsuit. Well, the privileged document was related to communications that Katie Case and Brianna Koslow's attorneys claim are communications about privileged conversations with attorneys in commencement of or preparation for litigation. And the litigation was because, Blake Lively and her best friend, Leslie Sloan, and hard hitter PR agent said that they were going to sue after they had gotten the phone of Miss Jennifer Abel. So when she filed the motion to compel, she attached the privilege logs, and then she did not redact those phone numbers. So the next day, the judge, seeing that on the docket, ordered the clerk to immediately seal these records. So naturally, if the judge is ordering you to seal a record that you just filed because he said it has personal identifying information in it and phone numbers that were not redacted, you would think that the attorneys then would respond, but they haven't. They've been too busy fighting with Perez Hilton and fighting with Wayfair about an extension of time to respond to privilege logs, fighting with Katie Case and Brianna Koslow about privilege logs. They have been too busy trying to get attorney-client privilege documents that they shouldn't have any right to have, although at this point we have no idea if the judge will actually agree because the judge doesn't seem to care. But in this case, apparently he wanted these sealed. And when something is sealed, then they need to file a redacted version onto the docket. But her attorneys did not. And so that required the judge to nudge, and let Blake know what she's doing is wrong. On August 8th, counsel for Blake Lively's filed letter motions to compel. See dockets 585 and 86, and an accompanying declaration in support of the motions. Included exhibits D, E, and H included personally identifying information in the form of personal phone numbers. Pursuant to its supervisory powers, the court ordered docket number 587 administratively sealed. See docket number 588. District courts have a supervisory power over their own court records and files, and that supervisory power is routinely used to redact or otherwise restrict access to sensitive, personally identifying information contained in court documents. The court determines under Logish and Pyramid Company of Onaganda that the higher value of protecting the individual's privacy rights in their personal phone numbers overcomes any presumption of public access to that information, as the PII has no apparent relevance to any pending motion or legal issue, and the redaction of the information would be narrowly tailored to promote the individual privacy interests. Going forward, the parties will not be required to seek court permission to redact in public filings personal identifying information in the form of phone numbers or email addresses, unless those numbers or email addresses have some plausible relevance to a pending legal issue. Accordingly, she is directed to publicly refile versions, docket number 587, with all phone numbers and email addresses redacted from the attachments. Blake Lively and her attorneys file so much onto this docket that does not protect any individuals. And yet, when someone files something for Blake that she doesn't like, she's like immediately demanding a motion to strike, right? So the 3 docket numbers that he wanted were related to Katie Case's privilege logs, which contained phone numbers of 2 people that have not been named as witnesses, not been named as anyone being subpoenaed. And then there's another one here where there's a phone number for multiple people here where they're not even identified. And then, I mean, there's 5 or 6 phone numbers on here where you have no idea who these people are. And the court can redact those phone numbers on their docket, but court listener still has these live. So he can ask them to be removed from Pacer and struck there. But once they're downloaded on a court docket and court listener, where you can get documents for free, and it's sort of this system where you can go there and use their services. You can also donate by downloading documents for other people. So it's sort of like a file share service where everyone can access the records, but nobody has to spend all the money on these. I wish I would have known about this months ago before I spent $5,000 on court records for Blake Lively, but that's neither here nor there. But these are still on the docket on court listener. And so he can remove them from his record, but he can't remove them from the internet. And so the damage at that point is done. And it begs the question of what benefit they had to put this out there and what were they trying to get people to talk about? Because when they put these out, immediately pro-lively content creators started looking up the phone numbers that were on there that didn't have a name attached to them. And then they started, following their little trail and saying, oh, well, this person wasn't part of them, so they shouldn't be privileged. And why is this person on there? And who's this person? Literally doxing the phone numbers on Twitter and attaching them to names. So the damage at that point was already done. And it feels like it's not even a mistake for them to do this because they've done it so much. In fact, one of the phone numbers that she was doxing happened to be one of the people she was filing the motion to compel against, Brianna. It defies logic that Blake Lively's attorneys would so recklessly and carelessly do things like this. And yet it would appear that the weaponization of Blake Lively's fans are what they're aiming for. I can see no other valid reason why they would do this to anyone. Because now you have a number on the docket where someone can contact the targets here, like Brianna or like Katie or any of the people she's tried to serve or anyone at Wayfair that she's mad at. Why would you go out of your way to post phone numbers knowing full well that if it happened to you, you would flip out? So the judge at this point, it's become such a freaking issue for her to do this that now he's basically telling Blake that you have no excuse at this point to not redact phone numbers or email addresses of individuals that are a part of this litigation or that are being subpoenaed. A service processor doing an affidavit of service is far different for an address when the address doesn't seem to be connected to the person. Like, for instance, they tried to find Isabella Ferreira, and both addresses that were provided by her attorney to Wayfair weren't where she lived. So you're not going to find Isabella in those locations. But when it comes to Blake, what does it do to dox Brianna's phone number? Really, other than to try to intimidate her. And then that your little people are going to look it up. And then we've already seen what happened at Steve Sorowitz's home. Blake Lively was so busy doxing people last week that she filed that omnibus motion to compel, and she put, I don't know, like 100 attachments, 2,000 plus pages were on there. And that demanded that every single document that was sealed in there, they had to go through to determine if they wanted to continue sealing it. Much like how Blake Lively was crying to the judge last week about the motion to strike, about her transcript, that it would require her to defend resealing or continue to seal her transcript of her declaration or of her deposition. Well, because she filed so many documents on Monday, a bunch of people filed requests to continue sealing. But even within this, and he decided to unseal some of these documents, he noted to Blake again that she needs to file phone numbers and personal identifying informations and bank account numbers redacted in exhibits. Blake's second amended complaint is going to be unsealed. So we'll take a look at that later because it has quotes from discovery that's marked sealed or confidential. He wrote, the motions primarily seek continued sealing of personally identifying information, including personal phone numbers and email addresses and bank routing and account numbers. The motions are granted to the extent that they seek continue limited sealing of the phone numbers, email addresses, and banking routing account numbers in the exhibits. She's directed to publicly refile all exhibits to docket number 554 containing PPI with narrow redactions removing that personal information. So rather than forcing every single person whose information might be at risk of being doxxed, including their bank accounts, phone numbers, and email addresses, he's putting that on Lively. So even if someone didn't request a resealing, he doesn't care. At this point, he seems to know that Blake doesn't care to redact literally anything when she files something on the docket. It, again, defies logic why Blake would file a bank statement onto the court docket with not redacting the account number. I just want to tell you how egregious this is. I am currently following a case related to Robert Shin, who is an alleged cult leader who is under federal investigation for a variety of crimes, including forced labor and sex trafficking, in a civil case that was filed in Los Angeles just this week. Attorneys for the plaintiffs suing Robert Shin filed copies of his bank statements, and without even asking for the request of the court, they redacted the numbers of the bank accounts. It's almost like that's what you're supposed to do. It takes 2 seconds to redact the number and not expose it to the public, and then have to force the person whose document you're filing unredacted bank account numbers. She put Jed Wallace's bank account documents on the public docket and said if they want to reseal, they can reseal. So instead of forcing every single person here to redact and refile, Blake's the one that's going to have to go through all 2,000 pages and find anything that has personal identifying information. He's also going to continue resealing some stuff from Paylocity, which is Steve Sorowitz's company. And he speaks about how the Wayfair parties moved for the continued sealing of a bunch of documents that they have. And it says, finally, she moves to unseal, citing third-party witnesses' consent to unsealing. The court grants this motion to unseal, but again, directs, consistent with the discussion above, that the personal identifying information in the form of personal phone numbers and email addresses be redacted. So anything that he's unsealing here can't be unsealed today because Blake's attorneys are going to have to spend hours personally redacting phone numbers, email addresses, bank account numbers, and account numbers at credit card and bank statements. This might not be, a verbal slapdown to her like Wayfair got about the motion to strike, but it's clear this is 2 orders in a row where she is being scolded for filing records that are including account numbers, phone numbers, and email addresses with no even thought that what she's doing is wrong. I mean, she also is defending to the judge her posting a photograph of Perez Hilton's Instagram, where she does not have to show any of the posts that are on it. All she needed to show was the bio, where his children are in a photograph, or going to his website and going to an about section, which is not on the front page, and it contains a photograph with him and his family that she put on the public docket. And she's saying, well, it's already out in the public, so who cares? That's completely different than filing it into a federal court on a docket in public record for the availability of the public. Not everyone that follows Blake knows who Perez Hilton is. And so then they're going to have these pictures of these children that are not affiliated to this case and they have no reason for being on this docket. And rightfully so, Perez is flipped out right now. And he wrote a letter to the judge today that could possibly get him in trouble. Not going to lie. And he's very upset. And he calls her litigious lively. And he's demanding that they seal this. He's calling her litigious lively. He says, I get to choose to share my children on social media, how and if I want. I do not want them on this court docket in a case that's being watched closely by passionate observers, some of whom are very dangerous. One of the Wayfair defendants had arson on his property as a result of this case, and a criminal was charged with threatening to kidnap. Additionally, many of the parties and non-parties in this litigation have received death threats. Shame on Blake Lively and Ezra for this action. And that's the issue. When she doxes these phone numbers and email addresses, she's giving out their information publicly so her fans can find these people, dox them, send them death threats, show up at their house, try to kidnap their kids. You know, she knows what she's doing. And now the judge is telling her, finally, you need to stop. And I hope the judge removes those photographs off the docket of his kids, because she doesn't need to show a photo of him and his social media to the court to prove her point. She just did that to be mean and to be like vindictive. You know, she'd freak out if anyone posted photographs of her kids on the docket. All right, y'all, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Are you surprised to see the judge scolding Blake? Let me know. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.